The oak trees lining Butterberry Lane cast long, dappled shadows onto the sidewalk as the sun began its sloping descent for the evening. Nestled halfway down this quiet road stood Pettigrew's Bakes and Cakes, a modest storefront with a warm glow and a painted sign in cheerful pastel hues. Its windows showcased immaculate confections, cupcakes decorated with swirls of lavender frosting, diminutive sugar roses perched daintily on tiered cakes, and walls lined with jars of colourful sprinkles. Locals adored Pettigrew's, not just for the treats but for the comforting feeling that pervaded the place. Tessa Cahoon, apprentice baker extraordinaire, if only in her own eyes, wiped a bit of flour from her cheek and took a quick breather. She had just finished kneading a large ball of dough, her arms tired from the work, but her spirit lively. She loved everything about the bakery, from the tang of yeast near the ovens to the sweet scent of chocolate. Her boss, Mr. Bernard Pettigrew, had trained under famous pastry chefs in the city before moving to Butterberry Fields, a picturesque town known for its friendly neighbours and luscious farmland. Butterberry Fields kept its calmer pace, even on Thursdays, when deliveries and pre-orders ballooned just before the weekend celebrations. On this particular afternoon, Tessa was reorganizing the recipe cards underneath the counter when the bell above the shop's door announced a new arrival. Glancing up, she saw a middle-aged woman in a wide-brimmed straw hat step inside. Her face was warm, framed by a halo of frizzy hair that had escaped the hat's borders. "Hello there," the woman said, a slight tremor in her voice. "I'd like to place a special wedding cake order." Tessa sprang to her feet. This was exactly the kind of thing she loved. Wedding cakes were special, full of hope and sweetness. "Of course," she said, beckoning the woman toward a small table reserved for consultations. "Would you like to sit down?" Reluctantly, the woman took a seat. Tessa noticed that her eyes darted toward the door, as though she expected someone else to join them. I need this wedding cake in 2 weeks, she explained, for my niece's ceremony. She began rifling through a bag to pull out folded, wrinkled papers, her hands trembling slightly. Tessa took note and politely waited. "Very good," Tessa responded. "We can do designs, flavors, decorations, whatever the bride envisions. Do you have any preferences?" The woman cleared her throat. "She wants lemon cream for 1 tier, and the top should be spiced carrot. 4 tiers in total, each separated by those little columns, right? Covered in white fondant." She cast another uneasy glance at the door and handed Tessa the folded papers. "You'll see some additional details here. They're instructions." Tessa accepted the pages. Once the woman left, Tessa smoothed them out on the small wooden table. The instructions looked disjointed, more like scribbled notes than a typical wedding order. She saw a list of icing colours: bright green, a dusty gold, and pink tinted with the faintest hue of copper. Her eyebrows knitted together. Those were unusual colour choices for a wedding, especially since the main fondant was supposed to be white. But people had some funny ideas for cake design, so she stashed the instructions in the bakery's special order folder, resolving to bring them to Mr. Pettigrew's attention later. Tessa returned to the main countertop, sliding the order into a neat pile. After finishing the day's tasks, frosting cupcakes, testing new cookie recipes, updating the inventory, she forgot the instructions for the moment. Once the last customer was out the door and the lights were dimmed, Tessa remembered to mention the wedding cake request to Mr. Pettigrew. "Unusual colours," the older man echoed, brushing a bit of powdered sugar off the front of his apron. "I suppose it could be some sort of theme. It's not the first time we've had interesting requests. Do you recall the bride who wanted each tier to represent a different continent?" He gave a good-natured laugh, remembering that complicated commission. "Right," Tessa said. "Just the combination of bright green, dusty gold, and a pinkish copper stands out to me." "Well," Mr. Pettigrew replied, scratching his chin, "set them aside and we'll take a closer look in the morning. Maybe we'll piece together something appealing for the design." That night, Tessa went home to her small studio apartment above the local apothecary and laid in bed wondering why the client had been so jumpy. She was used to excited, sometimes frazzled wedding customers, But this felt different, like the woman was scared of something or someone. The next morning her curiosity led her to open the envelope of instructions again. She expected a simple drawing or something referencing floral patterns, but as she examined the scribbles more thoroughly, Tessa realized they might not be random. There were directions like, fold pink at the edge of the second tier and use thicker piping tip for green vines. Then there was something truly odd. Gold shift for security box. It occurred to her that this might be some sort of code. Trying to puzzle it out, Tessa nearly jumped at the sound of Mr. Pettigrew's voice behind her. "Lost in thought, my dear. That cake does seem unusual." He peered over her shoulder at the scrawled directions. Tessa grimaced. "This doesn't look like standard wedding planning, does it?" Mr. Pettigrew adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses, his lively brown eyes dancing with intrigue. "Let's assume they're referencing something else. Could these instructions possibly point to an arrangement beyond a cake design?" He and Tessa fell silent. The faint hum of the bakery's refrigerators was the only noise. They exchanged a concerned look, their shared interest piqued. Over the next couple of days, the bakery bustled with normal orders. The lonely older gentleman came by for his customary blueberry scone. A gaggle of teens from the nearby school rushed in for brownies and iced coffee. A birthday girl in pigtails squealed with excitement over a frosting-laden treat. Amid the everyday clamor, Tessa couldn't shake the feeling that the wedding cake request was more than it seemed. Early one morning, Tessa found Mr. Pettigrew in the back room with a serious look on his face. He held the client's instructions, which now had red marks and circles around certain words. "I couldn't help but study this more," he admitted. "There seems to be a pattern. I can't be certain, but if we treat some of these phrases like hints, they might refer to addresses, times, or objects." "What do you mean, addresses?" Tessa asked. He pointed to a line that read, "Green lines up 345 through side gate," Mr. Pettigrew explained. "This could be a reference to a house or a building, and through side gate might be instructions for a route." Tessa's pulse quickened. "That's definitely suspicious. Should we go to Chief Henderson?" Chief Henderson was Butterberry Fields' revered police chief and lifelong resident, known for his easygoing nature but meticulous investigative style. Mr. Pettigrew tapped a finger to his chin. "Let's find something more concrete. For now, we can keep our eyes open." After lunch, Tessa overheard Mr. Pettigrew on the phone, presumably talking to the woman who placed the order. "Yes, ma'am, don't worry. All is on schedule," he said blandly, though Tessa could detect a hint of tension in his voice. The remainder of the day passed unremarkably, but after closing, Tessa and Mr. Pettigrew sat down with the instructions once again. They extracted lines that seemed to have no place in a cake recipe. Gold shift for security box, time locked, 10 p.m. Access from top tier, remove crowning lilies. Tessa's slender fingers tapped each line in turn. See, a security box is definitely not part of a wedding event. And time locked, 10 p.m. That could refer to a building's closing time, or maybe a safe that locks automatically. Mr. Pettigrew gave a low whistle. "It's almost like we're reading a burglary blueprint hidden inside a wedding cake order." He paused, shaking his head. Such a shame that someone would use a wedding as a cover for something sinister. Concern for the unwitting bride tugged at Tessa. Was her aunt, that nervous woman, truly the orchestrator of a burglary? Or was she coerced into dropping off these instructions? Though Tessa tried to rationalize the situation, her mind kept returning to the woman's shaky demeanor. The next morning, Tessa resolved to hear from the client face to face. She dialed the phone number on the order form, but there was no answer. She tried again that evening, still nothing. Days went by, and the only communication was a short note slipped under the bakery's door. "Please proceed with the design as instructed." The scrawl was the same as the original instructions. Whoever was behind this wanted the cake's decoration to be created precisely, no questions asked. With just 3 days left before the wedding date, Tessa found herself worried sick. She decided to confide in a friend, Lucy Greenfield, who worked as a part-time librarian and part-time historical archivist. If anybody knew how to decode hidden messages, it was Lucy. Seated in the bakery's back office, Lucy examined the instructions. She wore large, round glasses that highlighted her inquisitive eyes. "Fascinating," she declared, spreading the pages out upon Mr. Pettigrew's desk. "Look here. Some of the lines, when read in sequence, form partial addresses. This reference to 345 Orchard definitely suggests 345 Orchard Street, and that's the address for Butterberry Fields Savings and Loan." Tessa's hand flew to her mouth. "The bank?" Lucy nodded gravely. "Yes, indeed. And here, time locked, 10 p.m. The bank's vault might lock or unlock daily at that exact time. Many banks in small towns operate with older mechanical systems. And access from top tier, remove crowning lilies," Tessa repeated, her brow furrowed in confusion. "Could be instructions for removing a security camera, possibly located in a high corner or disguised near the bank's entrance," Lucy hypothesized. It was all clicking together. Someone was using the wedding cake design as a cipher for robbing the local bank, or at least planning a break-in. Tessa's stomach fluttered with nerves. Was it truly a wedding or just a ruse to carry out a heist? The big question was still why. Butterberry Fields Savings and Loan might not store large sums of money, although it did handle farmland mortgages and the local community's deposits. Perhaps the criminals believed the smaller bank would be an easier target. They agreed that going to the police was the obvious next step. Chief Henderson listened intently to Tessa, Lucy, and Mr. Pettigrew as they explained the suspicious notes. His normally relaxed posture straightened, his face growing concerned. "I'll assign a discreet patrol around the bank and keep the place under watch as we approach this so-called wedding date," he promised. "We won't tip them off before we have something solid." 2 days before the ceremony, Tessa considered cancelling the cake entirely or refusing service. But Mr. Pettigrew, after much deliberation, felt it was better to fulfill the order. Cutting off communication might alert the criminals that they'd been found out. The bride's aunt, or whoever tapped her for this scheme, would vanish and set up a new plan in the shadows. Best to keep them close. The day before the wedding, Tessa was putting the finishing touches on the 4-tiered cake. It was a labor of love, perfectly level tiers, smooth white fondant, precise piping. Then came the suspicious colors. Green vines twisting around the 2nd tier, the dusty gold accent on the 3rd, and an intricately piped pinkish copper swirl near the top. She felt a heaviness in her chest, as though she was being forced to construct the blueprint of a crime scene. With each delicate swirl of icing, she was adding another line to the burglar's roadmap. She carefully placed the sugar lilies at the top, dread gnawing at her. This beautiful creation was a front for something vile. Early the next morning, the day of the wedding, the cake waited in the refrigerated bakery van, ready for delivery. Tessa hovered outside the store, fidgeting. Mr. Pettigrew pulled up with the van, and together they loaded the cake. He'd accepted an address a few miles outside the main centre of Butterberry Fields, an old estate overlooking a small orchard. "Probably it's been rented for the wedding," he said, though he sounded uncertain. They set off toward the orchard, the sky a brilliant crystalline blue. As they turned onto a winding dirt road, Tessa spotted a large house at the end, flanked by pink flowering trees in bloom. The building looked more or less abandoned, its windows dusty, shutters in need of fresh paint, the lawn overgrown. Yet there was a sign posted near the gate that read, "Private event wedding of Marion Quinn and Daniel Ridley." Tessa marched forward, determined to see who exactly was behind all this. Mr. Pettigrew was helping a pair of part-time staffers carry the cake inside. A small cluster of guests wandered the yard, some in formal attire, some in casual dress. The entire scene felt off, too haphazard and quiet for a wedding day. Inside, Tessa found a tall man fiddling with a set of sound equipment by a table piled with mismatched chairs. He shrugged at Tessa's question about the bride. "Dunno," he muttered. "Got hired to do the music for the reception. Haven't seen the bride yet." As she edged deeper into the house, the hair on the back of Tessa's neck stood up. The hallway leading to the back rooms was dimly lit, musty. Then, from behind a half-closed door, she caught sight of the client, the aunt in the straw hat, talking in hushed tones to a stranger. The man wore a dark suit, his expression intense. Tessa ducked behind a corner, straining to hear. "It's all ready," the woman was whispering. "The cake shows the plan. 10 p.m. we go in. Take what we need. Nothing can go wrong." The man in the suit's voice was low. "You better be right. Once it's gone, no one will suspect the bride's family. We'll be long gone by sunrise." Tessa's heart pounded. The aunt truly was an accessory to a major crime. She had to get word to Chief Henderson. Luckily, the plan was for them to strike that evening, plenty of time for the police to intercept. Tessa hurried back to the dining area, where Mr. Pettigrew was adjusting the final placement of the cake. Catching his eye, she subtly nodded, and he discreetly slipped away, presumably to find the nearest phone or step outside and call the police. Tessa lingered near the refreshments, making small talk with a couple of guests who seemed genuinely confused about the wedding details. It dawned on her that maybe these were real family members of the bride, entirely in the dark about the criminal scheme. As the afternoon wore on, Tessa could discern tension in the air. The aunt kept flitting by the cake to examine it, wringing her hands, occasionally stepping aside to send messages on her phone. Tessa spotted the stern man from earlier, giving curt orders to a few rough-looking individuals. It was clear they were orchestrating more than just a wedding reception. By twilight, Chief Henderson's discreet watch was in motion. Tessa felt reassured when she spied an undercover officer mingling among the guests. With each passing minute, she wondered if the ceremony would even happen. At 6 o'clock, an officiant appeared, a kindly older woman who glanced anxiously about for a bride and groom. Finally, in a swirl of lace and a trembling smile, a young woman, Tessa presumed was Marion Quinn, stepped forward. Her eyes had a wet sheen, as though she'd been crying. Daniel Ridley, presumably the groom, stood by her side. The pair spoke hurriedly to the officiant, who began the ceremony. Tessa watched from the sidelines, her chest aching for the poor couple, who seemed overshadowed by some scheme going on around them. The officiant quickly read through standard vows. Marion and Daniel exchanged rings with shaky hands. Then, just like that, they were pronounced married. Only about 20 people clapped. The bride's aunt gave a quick, stiff smile, then guided the bride off for pictures near the orchard. The hush that followed was eerie. Shortly after, dinner and cake cutting were supposed to commence. Tessa carefully cut the first slice for the couple, the swirl of various icings and flavors nearly mocking her with their hidden meaning. Guests gathered to taste the cake, offering kind remarks. The aunt, however, barely touched her slice. She and the man in the suit whispered intently in the corner. Tessa kept sneaking glances at them. She could sense the tension building. Once the official wedding moments were over, a few of the guests with real ties to the couple made their exits, scurrying off into the evening with polite goodbyes. That left a small group behind, people Tessa recognized as the thugs. The aunt had conferred with throughout the day. She realized the criminals might use the empty house as a rendezvous point after the bank heist. It was nearing 9 o'clock, and Tessa glimpsed the aunt heading outside with her phone pressed to her ear. Tessa waited until she was far enough away, then quietly approached the man in the suit. She pasted on her most convincing smile. "Excuse me," she said. "I noticed you've hardly tasted our cake." "That's unfortunate, because it's a specialty of our bakery." He tensed, snapping his gaze to her. "I don't have a sweet tooth," he muttered. "I see," Tessa replied lightly, her pulse pounding. She edged closer. "I hope you won't mind if I surprise you with a to-go slice." She reached for a plate behind her, but he batted her hand aside brusquely. Before Tessa could respond, a muffled ring came from inside the man's jacket. Answering his phone, he stepped aside. Tessa heard him say, "All set. Be there in half an hour." That was it. The final piece of confirmation. The criminals were about to leave for the bank. She rushed outside to Mr. Pettigrew, who stood by the orchard's edge. The older baker looked relieved to see her. "Chief Henderson's team is in place at the bank," he told her. "We need to stall them until the police can catch them in the act." "What if they leave now?" Tessa asked, worry creeping into her voice. "They're heading out any minute," Mr. Pettigrew answered. "Let's return inside and observe." They re-entered the house to see the aunt, the man in the suit, and the other conspirators donning coats, quietly sneaking out the side door. Tessa feigned busying herself collecting leftover plates, while Mr. Pettigrew prepared to follow them at a safe distance, intending to tip off police with real-time updates. The criminals believed it would be a clean operation. They had no idea the authorities were lying in wait. A feeling of anticipation made Tessa's skin prickle. Part of her wanted to go with Mr. Pettigrew and watch the sting unfold, but she also understood that would be too dangerous. She stayed behind, tidying up the leftover cake and noticing with a pang that the actual newlyweds were nowhere to be found. She hoped they'd remain safe and out of the criminals' crosshairs. Night had fully descended when the criminals reached the bank. Chief Henderson and his officers had concealed themselves around the perimeter, waiting for the moment the group attempted to break in. According to the plan, the criminals would try to slip in through a side gate and disable the security camera. But as soon as they began tampering with the lock, the beam of an officer's flashlight swept over them. "Freeze!" came a strong voice from the darkness. The aunt stifled a scream, dropping a small duffel bag. The man in the suit snarled a curse, swung around, only to be met by another officer's outstretched handcuffs. Within moments, the entire group was subdued, their robbery scheme foiled. Tessa paced anxiously at the orchard house until she spotted the lights of police vehicles heading her way. Mr. Pettigrew, stepping out of a patrol car behind them, gave her a reassuring nod. "They have them," he confirmed softly. "All of them." Relief flooded Tessa's limbs. She couldn't help the small smile of triumph. The tension in her chest began to ease at last. One by one, the criminals, including the man in the suit and the aunt, were led into the orchard's driveway in handcuffs. They scowled at Tessa and Mr. Pettigrew, evidently realizing the bakery had played a role in uncovering their dastardly plan. Chief Henderson approached Tessa. "You did the right thing coming to me as soon as you suspected something," he said, raising an approving eyebrow. "Your hunch and quick thinking saved the bank and the townspeople's money." "But what about the bride?" Tessa blurted, her face flushed with concern. She could hardly imagine the emotional toll this day took on poor Marion. Chief Henderson's expression softened. "She's safe, from what I hear. Found out only this morning that her aunt was involved in some shady dealings. The aunt apparently insisted on hosting the wedding outside the main town, near this orchard, to keep her business hidden. The bride's none the wiser about the specifics, but had a bad feeling. The aunt manipulated her own niece's wedding for cover." Tessa's heart tightened at the thought. "I hope the newlyweds can move forward in peace." Chief Henderson tipped his hat. "I'm sure they will. Best wedding gift they'll get is seeing that aunt behind bars." With that, the police escorted the criminals away. Tessa and Mr. Pettigrew shared a weary smile, and Lucy, who had quietly arrived on the scene, rushed over and enveloped Tessa in a hug. Mr. Pettigrew patted Tessa gently on the back. "Well, my dear, that was something," he said. "I doubt we'll ever look at wedding cake instructions the same way again." He chuckled tiredly, the tension lifting now that the crisis had passed. Lucy, buoying Tessa's triumphant relief, said, "Let's head back to the bakery. I could use a cup of tea, and maybe a slice of normal cake with no hidden messages." Tessa couldn't help but laugh. That sounds perfect. In the coming days, word quickly spread around town of the attempted bank heist. Locals clucked their tongues in surprise, praising the apprentice baker's sharp instincts and Mr. Pettigrew's vigilance. The newlyweds, after an understandably fraught celebration, returned to thank Tessa. They sheepishly explained that, if not for Tessa's discovery, they would have begun married life carrying the burden of a fiasco none of them had wanted. Tessa remained humble, repeatedly insisting she'd only done what anyone would have in her place. But truth be told, she felt proud. She was a baker's apprentice who had stumbled across something big and helped protect her sweet hometown. Life in Butterberry Fields soon settled back into gentle normalcy. Newspapers replaced headlines of the foiled burglary with announcements of upcoming seasonal festivals. One late afternoon, Tessa found herself once again in the bakery, cleaning stray flour from the tabletops, when Mr. Pettigrew approached with a wistful grin. "We've just got a new wedding cake order," he teased. "Do you think it's safe to accept?" Tessa grinned back. "As long as it's not for bright green dusty gold and pinkish copper icing, I think we can manage." She tossed aside her rag. "Though, if we get anything suspicious, I'm reviewing it with a magnifying glass first." They both laughed, letting the warm aroma of fresh pastries comfort them, a gentle reassurance that in Butterberry Fields all was well. And although the wedding cake escapade was over, Tessa's eyes would always stay open for the next puzzling swirl of icing that might hint at a hidden plan. After all, even small towns could hold big secrets, and many of them, it turned out, were hidden in plain sight.